We have got a pretty big test ahead of us today, as I am going to be putting these two big brands head to head to find out which is better out of the new Qi4D or the Quantum driver. Now, personally, I feel like this is a really good test because I think a lot of golfers will potentially be looking at these two drivers purely based on the name. But the reality is there are a lot of differences between these two. They lie on two complete different sides of the scale when we're looking at certain elements of these drivers. So we are going to run through that. I'm not just going to tell you which one is better for me, but we're also going to do a really thorough comparison so that you can see which one would be better for your game. Now, obviously we can't do a driver video without talking about some of the tech and what really sets these two apart. And a lot of that comes from the face technology this year. So with the Quantum drivers, we can see when we look at the back of the head cover, I personally do not like this detail, but it's very good at being there and reminding you what technology we have, because the Quantum drivers have this new Tri-Force face. And what that means is that the face is made up of 3 different materials that are acting together as one system to essentially give you ultimate ball speeds. And that is why this is called Quantum, because Callaway is saying you are going to see a quantum leap in terms of the performance, specifically in the ball speeds and the distances. Then with the Qi4D, TaylorMade are looking at the 4 dimensions required for speed. First off, it is the face. We've got a fully carbon face that is patented. It is technology that only TaylorMade are allowed to use. Nobody else can use that tech. We've also got a big focus on the shafts, and with those shafts we're looking at matching the swing profile, the amount of rotation, to the shaft that you're using. These are shafts that TaylorMade have made with Mitsubishi to make sure this driver is working as an entire system specifically for that particular golfer. Then the other 2 dimensions are the head and the fitting process. So there's a lot of customization available in the Qi4D range. We've got 4 changeable weights in that driver. So because of all those elements, you would really be able to get that driver dialed in exactly to your golf game during the fitting process. So what we're going to do today to test these out and pick a winner, I'm going to run you guys through pretty much everything we can, how they feel, how they perform in terms of the consistency, the overall aesthetics and packaging of these drivers, and how that relates to the performance, as well as finally running you through a deep dive in the numbers between these two. Now, there's 2 ways that I could have made this video, right? I could have done it and said, this is the driver for me, full stop. Hope you guys are the exact carbon copy, same golfer as me, otherwise it's useless for you. And I am still going to come out with my favorite of the 2, but I want you guys to kind of play along with me. And what I mean by that is I'm going to pick out my winner for each of the categories as we go through, but I want you to pick out yours as well, because we might be similar, but we're probably not the same golfer. Now, both of these drivers are very different in terms of aesthetics when you're looking at the ball. They've both got carbon. That is the main thing that these two have in common. When we're looking at the Quantum driver, that is a shiny, reflective carbon top to it. The color of the Qi4D is quite different to the color of the Qi35, and I personally really like how the Qi4D looks on the crown. I've always said I prefer a matte head. I know that not everybody does. And I feel like they both just look as you would expect from those 2 brands. They have their very characteristic looks. With the Callaway driver, we've got that little front bit on the crown that isn't the reflective carbon pattern. You've also got that chevron that lines up really nicely. You can actually see on the face of this driver, we've got those really, really clear alignment aids. I love that with this driver. I think it's so easy to set up square. Then coming over to the Qi4D, we have got more design on the top of it, similar to the Quantum. So you've got that little pattern that runs around the edge of the crown that I think is just trying to make this look a little bit sleeker and a little bit smaller. Again, with the alignments, you've got this really strong line at the very front of the crown moving onto the face of the driver. Now, the one thing with the TaylorMade drivers, and I don't know if anybody else has ever found this, but I had this with the Qi35 as well. I convinced myself that the alignment aid is too far to the heel, and so I line it up to hit the ball from the toe. And then I try and move it, and obviously I don't hit from the center of the club. So that is just something that you probably need to get used to if you haven't used a TaylorMade driver with that shaping before. I don't know, maybe that's just a me problem. Let me know if you've had that problem too. It would make me feel a lot better if I'm not the only person in the world that struggles with that. Anyway, I'm actually gonna put the Quantum driver as the winner in terms of the looks, because I think that looks only matter when it affects performance. With the TaylorMade, I can hit it from the center, but it takes a little bit more time and effort and just like a little bit of getting used to. And so for that reason, I would say I don't prefer the looks of the Quantum, but I think Quantum wins in looks because of the effect of performance that it has. As you can see, we've got 4 weights here. You can really dial this in to make it as forgiving as possible, to give it a draw bias, give it a fade bias. There's options there. This has options for draw or neutral. It does not have the option for a fade. That said, this driver kind of does allow for a fade, which we will come on to when we hit some shots. And what I do like about the Qi4D is that you're not limited to just one of those. You buy this core driver and you've got so many options when it comes to the adjustability. So I would say that's a huge plus point there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a big part of the tech with the Qi4D is in the shaft. Because the shaft technology is such a key part in the Qi4D and it's one of the 4 dimensions, I didn't think it would be right to put the same shaft in both of them. The two of them are close, they're both 60-gram stiff shafts. This is just TaylorMade's version of this that is meant to work with the golfer and work with the golf club as well. It honestly feels as though the shaft is just filled with like cloud or something. It's so light and it's so easy to hit. The one slight caveat with that is that every so often that means that I flip my hands over. That's more because of me as a golfer, but because it's so light, it is quite easy to just accidentally do that on impact. But overall, just like a really, really easy club to hit. And that I think is coming more from the React shaft than anything else. Now I can see that was pretty high and pretty far off the toe, and still 136 ball speed, 243 in terms of total length. The carry there is like a tiny bit low, but it was a miss strike. But I think that's kind of showing the stability of this driver. And there is a difference with the feel by quite a lot. And again, this is super subjective. These two drivers have very, very different feels to them because there's very different face technology in there. It's very buttery, feels like it holds onto the golf ball. And there is something really special about when you hit the center of this driver face that you feel it, which I guess incentivizes good shots and hitting from the center, but there is a difference there in terms of the feel. Okay, I hope you heard that. I'm not sure if you'll hear the difference on that, but that was much, much closer to the center. It's a bit of a different sound when you hit it from that center point, and some of the, like 261 is absolutely ridiculous for me. 231 with the carry. I know that it's got roll out there because the backspin is just a little bit low. That's just come from where I had the face at impact rather than anything else. But the ball speed is up, the carry is up. Like 230 is incredible for me in terms of carry. There is definitely a difference there in the numbers in terms of the miss strikes compared to those from the center. Normally, I would mark a driver down for that because what you tend to see is that your center strikes are good and your miss strikes really just fall off in terms of the control and the distance. But that's not the case here. I feel like the miss strikes with the Qi4D is more like my normal shots, and then you just unlock this whole other level when you're hitting from the center. It's that super soft, really nice, like bouncy carbon material. And if you don't like the carbon feeling, that's okay, because we've got another option here. And what Callaway have done, they have made use of the carbon in these drivers, but the new material here is this Triforce face. We've got 3 different materials kind of all coming in and acting as one system. If you want something that feels a little bit more powerful, a little bit more solid from the face, that Triforce material is absolutely delivering that. It's very loud, it has that feeling of power at impact, and I think people who are chasing a little bit more speed, a little bit more distance, they're gonna love that because it is simulating all that strength, all that power coming through because of the face there. Now, where the Qi4D feels floaty and cloudy and effortless, the Quantum feels like effort. I just feel like throughout the swing, this feels a lot heavier than the Qi4D in the way that it's set up. I don't think that either of them are massively one way or the other. I think it's just that there's quite a big difference between the two of them, so I'm noticing that more when I'm hitting between them. Now, something else that I said earlier was that with the Quantum Max, we can either put it in neutral or draw. I have it in neutral because I'm comparing the core models. I really want to put it in draw because I was seeing really the best performance, the best numbers, the best control in the draw setting because I like to play a draw. I do not like seeing the golf ball going out to the right like that. I do find it interesting that draw and neutral are the only options on here, and I will say that I do not feel as though the draw setting is that intense or anything like that. The draw setting actually acted more like the neutral. I'm just not going to do that because it's not really fair to compare the two with different weight settings in. Now, just before we get into the data, a quick reminder that if you haven't already, I would really, really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It massively supports me out, like more than you realize. I used to be the type of person who would watch YouTube videos, hear them say please subscribe, and just not do it. But then when I started making them, I realized how important it is. And if that is not enough to convince you, you may have noticed that I have a lot of drivers right here behind me. And what we have coming next on this channel is the full 2026 drivers, all the new releases put head to head to find a winner. That is something a lot of people have been asking me for in the comments. It is coming, it is on its way, and you do not want to miss that. But anyway, now that you've hit that subscribe button, we can get onto the data. So looking between these two, I feel like the data that I have found, I expected to be the other way around when I went into this, okay? I expected the Callaway driver to be the one that is going the furthest and maybe being a little bit more erratic and harder to control, and the TaylorMade to be the one that's coming up a little bit shorter. Spoiler, it's not. It's kind of the other way around. So let's have a look at the exact numbers that I am talking about here. So let's look at the carries. 228 yards on average with the Qi4D versus 225 yards with the Quantum. So really not that much difference, you know, literally there, 3 yards. The dispersion on that is also 3 yards for both, so quite nice and consistent, which I do like to see with the carries. And then the totals was exactly the same story, 253 for the Qi4D versus 250 for the Quantum. The only difference there is that the Qi4D had a little bit more variation than the Quantum, so I could get these like really, really long shots, and actually my longest balls were coming from the Qi4D when I really hit that center and got up to that 140, 141 ball speed. And so because of that, I think you just see these peaks at higher distances every so often, whereas the Quantum is a little bit shorter, nearly dropped it there, marginally by 3 yards or so, but it's really consistent, so that's really nice to see. In terms of speed, very, very similar, 138.7 versus 137.3. So basically like a yard and a half of difference there. Again, it was the Quantum that was more consistent. I think it's just that same thing of when you really hit the center and you really connect, just some of the numbers with the Qi4D are insane, and they're just unlocking this new level in terms of how far and how fast the ball is going to go. Backspins are very similar, with the Quantum spinning up just a little bit. Again, Quantum is more consistent there. And then both of them also had some quite similar numbers there, so both coming up at a peak height of an average of 78, both with a descent angle of 34 degrees, and club speed was both at 94. So even though I felt as though the Quantum driver, I was having to put more effort in, I was actually swinging them both at the same speed. I felt like I was swinging the Qi4D a lot faster, but in reality, they were both the same, which is good to see actually. I think it's just weird how they feel so different and yet they're producing the same club head speeds. I don't know. Qi4D was 3 yards to the left, whereas the Quantum was 6 yards to the right, and those two were actually quite consistent overall. There wasn't too much of a variation there. The thing for me is I don't want to see the ball going off to the right. Okay, so I kind of have to mark the Quantum down a little bit for that, but hear me out now, because there is a solution. You can put the Quantum into the draw setting. I see a tiny bit more ball speed, a tiny bit more distance, and it basically brings it up to the numbers of the Qi4D that we saw today. The issue is then Qi4D, that is not moving any of the weights around, and there's so much adjustability there that I am also able to dial that in and see even more performance, which is really impressive for the Qi4D. Now there is also the matter of the price. So the Qi4D is coming in just a little bit cheaper than the Callaway, which I find really interesting given what we have on offer here. Both of these drivers are really high performing, but would I say that I see a little bit of an increase on the Callaway driver for performance? Not massively, no, especially from the data set that we are looking at today. They're both really high performing drivers, especially in terms of the ball speed and distance category, and that is the big claim that both of these manufacturers were making with this year's lineup. I think for me, I'm moving towards the Qi4D, especially with it coming in at that slightly lower price point, but ticking more of the boxes for me in terms of performance. Let me know which one you guys would be moving towards. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. If you have, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video.